Don't throw that stack of scratched DVDs in the trash. That silver disc in your hand right now is stronger than the plastic on half the tools on your bench. You clicked because it sounds impossible. It isn't. I proved it on my own workbench last month. One dead movie disc sharpened a chisel better than my $100 stone. A Japanese trick from 1996 is hiding inside it, and it works on the exact junk discs already in your drawer. Let me tell you where this started, because I was the guy laughing at this idea first. I had a coffee can full of old DVDs, burned movies, dead software, kids' cartoons scratched to death. I was about to dump the whole can. My chisel had gone dull that same afternoon, and my good Waterstone was clogged and dished out from years of use. I grabbed a disc off the top of the can just to wipe grit off my bench, and when the light caught the surface of that thing, something clicked in the back of my head that I couldn't shake for a week. Because I had read, months earlier, that these discs are not made of ordinary plastic. I had ignored it, filed it under useless trivia. But standing there with a dull blade and a can of trash, I started to wonder if the trivia was actually the whole secret. Here's the first thing nobody tells you. A DVD is not a plastic toy. It is optical-grade polycarbonate. That is the same family of material used in bulletproof windows, in riot shields, in fighter jet canopies, in safety goggles rated to stop a flying bolt. Polycarbonate was invented back in 1953, and it is one of the toughest transparent plastics ever made by human beings. It has an impact strength that shrugs off blows that would shatter glass into 100 pieces. And they hand it to you, molded into a perfect flat circle, for free, inside a movie you already watched once. So my first question wasn't how to sharpen anything. My first question was simpler, and it bothered me more. Why does a material this good come to me shaped like garbage? Why is something tougher than the handle on my utility knife treated as a coaster, a bird scarer, a thing you snap in half out of boredom? I didn't have the answer yet, but I had a hunch that the shape was the clue. Because that disc isn't just tough. It's made to a tolerance most of the tools you own will never see. Try this before you go further, because it changes how you see the whole disc. Take one old DVD and find the inner ring, the clear plastic near the hole. Get a knife tip or a fingernail into the edge seam and start peeling. A DVD will split into two halves, two thin sheets, each about 0.6 of a millimeter thick, bonded together with the shiny data layer sandwiched in the middle. That is why a DVD holds more than an old CD. They stacked two layers and glued them face to face. The moment I peeled my first disc apart, I stopped seeing trash. I saw two flat, tough, precision-molded sheets of engineering plastic, plus a whisper-thin skin of pure metal in between. 3 materials. Free. And I had a whole can of them. But splitting it open only deepened the mystery, because now I was staring at that metal layer, and the metal layer is where this gets strange. Here's the part where I got a little angry, and I think you will too. That shiny mirror surface inside the disc is real aluminum, vapor deposited, a coating so thin it's measured in nanometers, but it is genuine reflective metal laid down with more precision than the mirror in your bathroom. And pressed into that surface is something almost nobody realizes they are throwing away. A diffraction grating. Microscopic spiral tracks spaced about 740 nanometers apart on a DVD. Those tracks are so fine and so evenly ruled that they bend light into a full rainbow the instant you tilt the disc. Now stop and think about what that means. A real optical diffraction grating, the kind used in laboratory instruments to split light and measure it, used to cost serious money. Scientists ruled them by hand on precision engines over days, and the movie studios stamped a near-perfect one onto every disposable disc, tens of billions of times, and told you it was empty when the film was over. This is where the story turns, and this is where I want you to feel what I felt. You were never given a movie. You were given a piece of precision optical hardware with a movie temporarily printed on it, and the second you finished watching, you were trained to treat the hardware as empty. I needed to know if the toughness and the flatness could be turned into a tool, something that does real work. Therefore, I stopped playing with light and went back to the two bare polycarbonate sheets, because that's where the honest labor was hiding. Now, here is the layer that fooled me, and I'll admit it cost me a weekend. I assumed the value was in the metal, the shiny science fair part. I was wrong. The real gold was the clear plastic I almost peeled off and tossed. And to understand why, you have to understand what that disc had to survive to be born. To play a movie, a laser has to focus through that polycarbonate and track pits smaller than a wavelength of light, spinning at hundreds of revolutions a minute without the picture stuttering. That is physically impossible unless the disc is molded dead flat and dead consistent. If the plastic warped, if it varied in thickness, if it had ripples, the laser would lose focus and your movie would freeze. So the factories that stamp these discs hold flatness and thickness tolerances that would make a machinist whistle. Each half sheet is 0.6 of a millimeter, held so tight and molded so smooth that light passes through it cleanly at microscopic scale. Read that again. You are being handed, for free, a tough plastic sheet, molded to optical smoothness and controlled thickness. Do you know what shop supplies get sold on exactly those two properties? Feeler gauges, shim stock, precision spacers, flat lapping backers. People pay real money for flat, uniform, known thickness material, and you've been snapping it in half to hear the crack. So let me pull the first thread all the way out. The mystery of the video title, Why a 2-cent Disc Can Beat Expensive Gear, starts right here. The disc isn't cheap because the material is cheap. It's cheap because it was mass-produced by the tens of billions, and its value was hidden behind a single-use label. The tool industry sells you flatness. The optics industry sells you smoothness. The disc factories gave both away and dared you to notice. But knowing what the disc is doesn't tell you what to do with the beat-up ones. And I can already hear you. Your discs aren't pristine. They're scratched, fingerprinted, maybe warped from a hot car. So let me talk straight to you, the person with the ugly stack, because this next part is built for exactly your junk. You do not need a clean disc. You do not need a special disc. You do not need a machine, a lathe, or a single thing you don't already own. Everything from here works on the worst, most scratched up, coffee-ringed DVDs in the bottom of your drawer, using scissors, a knife, and stuff already on your bench. If your disc still holds its shape, it still holds its value, and the scratches are about to become irrelevant. Start with the simplest one, the one that saved me a trip to the hardware store. Remember those 0.6 of a millimeter halves? A full, unsplit disc runs right around 1.2 millimeters thick, and it's uniform across the whole face. That means a strip cut from a DVD is an instant shim. I have used DVD strips to shim a wobbly table saw fence, to pack out a loose bearing seat, to true up a machine foot that rocked on a concrete floor. Cut a small square, slide it in, and you've got a known, flat, tough spacer that won't crush like cardboard and won't rust like a washer. Need a feeler gauge in a pinch and yours walked off? A single peeled half at 0.6 of a millimeter or a full disc at 1.2 gives you a repeatable reference thickness. Stack 2 halves, and you're back at 1.2 again. Polycarbonate holds that dimension because the factory had no choice but to hold it. You're borrowing their tolerance. Now cut a disc into a curved blade shape, and you've got a scraper that won't scratch soft metal or finished wood the way steel does. Polycarbonate is hard enough to push dried glue, gasket material, paint, and grime, but it flexes instead of gouging. I keep a couple of DVD-shaped scrapers by the bench for cleaning up epoxy, squeeze-out, and old label goo. When one wears down, I don't sharpen it. I grab another dead disc from the can. Infinite supply. That training is worth billions to somebody. Because a person who sees garbage buys tools. A person who sees a molded, metallized, diffraction-ruled optical component starts asking why he ever paid for half the gadgets in his cart. If that shift in thinking is something you want to go deeper on, I wrote a book called Tool Mind, and there's a companion volume, Steel Instinct, that goes through exactly this kind of hidden value reasoning, layer by layer, applied to the tools and materials most people overlook every single day. If you want to read further than a single video can take you, check the description for details on how to get your copy. It's the same mindset you're building right now, just taken all the way to the end. But a rainbow on the wall is a party trick, and I don't run a shop for party tricks. Here's another one for the person who hates buying little plastic parts. Cut washers and spacers out of the flat area. A DVD washer is tough, non-conductive, and won't corrode. For electrical work where you want an insulating spacer, that non-conductive polycarbonate is doing a job a metal washer literally cannot. You're not settling for a substitute. In that specific case, the trash disc is the better material. And if you've got a hot air source, a heat gun, or even a mug of near-boiling water, polycarbonate goes soft and formable well before it burns. Its glass transition sits up around 147 degrees Celsius, so with gentle heat you can bend a strip into a bracket, a clip, a small guard, a custom guide. Let it cool and it locks into shape, stiff and strong again. I bent a DVD strip into a little chip guard for a rotary tool in about 4 minutes with a heat gun. None of that requires a good disc. Every bit of it works on scratched garbage. So the person who assumed this only pays off with some special material can let that worry go right now. The worse your discs look, the more of them you probably have, and every one is a sheet of shim stock, a scraper, a washer, a bracket, waiting for a pair of scissors. But shims and scrapers, useful as they are, still aren't the thing that made me stop and stare. Those are clever thrift. The title promised something that crushes an expensive tool, and I haven't shown you that yet. Therefore, I have to take you to the last layer, the one I circled back to after a week of nagging doubt, the one that ties this disc to a Japanese craft older than the plastic itself. Because here is the question that wouldn't let me sleep. My good Waterstone had gone dished and hollow in the middle from years of sharpening. A dished stone rounds your edge and ruins your work, and flattening it means buying a flattening plate that can run you real money. I had a can of the flattest, smoothest, most uniform sheets I'd ever handled sitting 3 feet away. What if the disc wasn't just a shim? What if it was the finishing surface itself? This is where I found the Japanese thread, and it changed everything. In traditional Japanese blade work, the craft of the togishi, the polisher, the edge is not simply ground sharp. It is taken through a progression of finer and finer surfaces, each one flatter and smoother than the last, until the final steps aren't really cutting steel at all. They are refining a mirror. The old masters understood something the power tool world forgot. The final polish that makes an edge bite and hold isn't about removing metal fast. It's about writing a perfectly flat, perfectly smooth reference surface so the very apex of the edge comes to a clean, unbroken line. Flatness at the finish is what separates a blade that shaves from a blade that merely looks sharp. That is the whole secret the expensive finishing gear is selling. Flatness and consistency at the final stage. And I was throwing that exact property in the trash by the canful. So I tested it, and I want you to do this yourself, because feeling it work is worth more than my word. I took one flat DVD, backside up, and laid it on a dead flat piece of my bench. A scrap of granite tile works perfect. That gave me a rigid, flat foundation. Then I put the tiniest smear of fine polishing compound on the smooth polycarbonate. The green stuff, the metal polish under your sink, even fine automotive rubbing compound, anything with a microfine abrasive. The polycarbonate is hard enough to carry the grit but slightly giving, so it beds the abrasive and holds it flat instead of letting it dig and gouge. Then I took my dull chisel, the one that had started this whole thing, set the bevel down, and drew it backward across that charged disc. Light pressure, a dozen strokes. Flipped it, and knocked the burr off the flat side on the same disc. The steel came up like a mirror, and when I dragged that edge across my thumbnail and then through a curl of pine end grain, it bit and peeled a shaving so thin I could read through it. $100 finishing stone does that. A dead movie disc did it for nothing. Here's why it beats the pricey stone, and this is the real solved core of the mystery. A natural or premium finishing stone wears hollow as you use it, and a hollow surface rounds your edge and lies to you about sharpness. The disc doesn't wear like that in a few strokes. It sits dead flat on a flat backing, and it delivers the two things the Togashi tradition says actually matter at the finish: a true flat plane and an ultra-smooth surface to carry the finest abrasive. You are recreating with trash the exact final stage of a craft that took centuries to perfect. The disc is the flattest, cheapest lapping film you will ever own, and it comes free inside a movie. And now, the reason this material exists in this shape at all snaps into place. Those precision tolerances, the flatness, the smoothness, the uniform thickness, weren't made for you. They were made so a laser could read a movie. Under a standard the electronics companies locked in around 1995 and 1996, when the DVD format was born in Japan. The very engineering that lets the disc play a film is the same engineering that makes it a finishing plate. The industry built a precision optical grade surface, sold it to you as entertainment, taught you to bin it when the show was over, and never once mentioned that you were holding a craftsman's tool the whole time. That is why the title isn't a trick. The cheap disc crushes the expensive plate because the disc was accidentally born with the one property the expensive plate charges you for, and then disguised as garbage so you'd never connect the two. Let me hand you the whole method clean, so you can do it this weekend with what's already in the house. Peel or keep a disc whole, your choice. For sharpening, lay it flat on any hard flat surface, smooth side up. No compound needed to start if you just want a strop. A smear of fine polish if you want a mirror. Draw your blade edge backward. Never push it forward into the disc. A dozen light strokes aside. Chase the burr and finish clean. For shims and gauges, cut strips and truss the 1.2 millimeters or 6/10 a half. For scrapers, cut a curve and push, don't gouge. For brackets and guards, warm it gently and bend it below 147 degrees Celsius. For a spectroscope on a rainy afternoon with a curious kid, use the metal side and a slit of light. Every one of those jobs, from the worst scratched disc in your drawer. I spent years thinking the difference between a cheap tool and a good one lived in the price tag. Tearing that disc apart taught me the difference usually lives in one hidden property, and that property is almost never as expensive or as rare as they need you to believe. You just have to know which layer to look at. The Togashi knew flatness was the secret 400 years ago. The disc factories built flatness by the billion and called it a movie. All I did was stand at my bench long enough to see both facts at once. So here's the feeling I want you to walk away with. You've been standing on top of a stack of precision tools this whole time, and somebody profited every year you called it junk. Not anymore. That can of dead discs is now shim stock, feeler gauges, scrapers, insulating washers, brackets, a spectroscope, and the flattest finishing plate in your shop, and you never have to buy a single one of those again. If you're still with me to the end, you're my kind of person. The kind who'd rather crack the thing open and figure out why than hand over a card and hope. So do one thing for me before you close this. Grab one dead DVD, split it into its two halves, and tell me in the comments whether yours came apart clean at the seam or fought you the whole way. because the bonding quality varies by brand, and I want to know what you're finding out there. Tell me where you're watching from too, and which disc job you're trying first, the sharpening plate or the shim stock. Subscribe and stand with the rest of us who take things apart, refuse to be sold the obvious answer, and keep the real skill on our side of the bench. Next time I'm cutting into something even more every day, a thing you toss without a second thought, and there's a hardened surface hiding inside it that can put an edge on steel. You will not guess what it is. But once you see it, like this disc, you'll never throw one away again. This video showed you why that disc works. But inside the Workshop Guild, I pick up right where we stopped, walking you through the full disc-to-tool method, every step measured. Get stuck? Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone. Tinkerers like you are already in there with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel any time, one click.